Hey, we're live, Bernie. Would you believe we're broadcasting to the world?
I would sort of believe it, all right.
So we're here to talk about the crisis at the Dublin prison for other animals, sometimes known as Dublin Zoo. Now I'm supposed to have two guests. Only one has shown so far, so that could be a problem. But we'll see. So we're trying to work on that. And as you can see, I've cut myself from the umbilical cord of the Animal Rights Show for this. So I might need Jeremy to help with all the technicalities, but I don't know. But we'll give it a go. So I'm just going to do a little preamble, and then we'll kind of try and have a discussion. If you've got any comments, then please put those in the comment thread. And for Bernie, you'll see at the right hand side of your page, you've got a box which has got comments in it. If you click on the one that says comments rather than private chat, then you'll see the comments coming in as they happen. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So hello everyone, and I'm just going to say this: that Joan Denea, in a book called Animal Equality, notes that zoos hate to be called prisons. However, if you look at definitions of prisons, you find words like confinement, forcible restraint, and captivity. And Denea says that perfectly describes zoos. So Dublin Zoo, or as I've dubbed it today, Dublin's prison for other animals, is in crisis. Apparently there's a financial crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. There's money running out, as all the headlines are screaming. I've got some examples actually for you. If you look at that, that's from The Liberal. So these are headlines from papers all over the world in the last couple of days. This is one from Politico. Here's a local one from Loving Dublin, as you can see. And then the fundraiser seems to be doing quite well. Apparently, they got €1 million on the first day. Did you know they got that amount, Bernie?
I did, yes.
Yeah. So that's pretty good. So there's been some kind of heated discussion, some of it quite heated, on various kind of animal advocacy circles and pages on Facebook and social media, etc. Basically saying, how do we as animal advocates or vegans, vegetarians, whatever, respond to this? In other words, do you donate or to feed the zoo inmates or not? So we're trying to find Brendan. One of our guests is called Brendan Price. He's an ex-zoo keeper, no less, and he's now very critical of zoos. But with me here, as you can see on the screen, that's Bernie Wright from the Alliance for Animal Rights, which is a Dublin-based animal advocacy group. And you've been going since 1989, I believe, Bernie.
Hi, I have, yes.
Well, the group, I mean.
The group, yes. I connected with animal rights since about 1989 when I came across the Alliance for Animal Rights table in town. It had just set up, and I'm sort of with it since I never left. So we're just basically working on a few campaigns at the moment, mainly the greyhound racing campaign. And the zoo has now popped up with their appeal for help, and they're saying basically they have no money to feed the animals.
They seem to have three revenue streams right now, Bernie. They've got the zoo has got an appeal, and that's already had €1 million in one day. But also, I did notice in one report that some private individuals have set up GoFundMe, so I don't know how many of those there are. But also, the government have announced that they're going to bail the thing out anyway. And one of the things that we wanted Brendan to talk about was that he knows about, in the past, they were bailed out before to the tune of €25 million euros. And then I also think that they were given another grant during the kind of Celtic Tiger era to kind of revamp and redo and kind of modernize the zoo, because Dublin Zoo is a Victorian thing. So, I think it looked pretty shabby at some points. I've never been to. Have you ever been inside that thing, Bernie?
Yeah, we used to be in there quite a lot when we had the active campaign running against it. So we were fairly familiar with what was happening then. They spent a lot of money doing it up in that. I'd say a lot was spent on car parks and restaurants and places like that. I'm not quite sure if a bigger place with bars is any better to animals, or a bigger place with a big glass screen rather than bars is an improvement for an animal that could be psychotic, or maybe not. But I doubt they're happy in there. I think really if you go in with any small bit of empathy in your heart, you can look at them for long enough and realize these animals are bored out of their tree. So many have died in there. I have a list here. There's a few pages on it of all the things that happened over the years. And I think it's a sad situation that we have to imprison animals like that. I know there's all the arguments about habitat and all the rest. I realize that, but we can do a lot better than we are doing, including, putting them in and bringing children in to look at them, because basically Dublin Zoo is a for-profit organisation. It's not run for the animals.
Yeah, when you say habitat, Bernie, you mean that there's no habitat to return them to? Is that what you mean?
Well, at this stage, the animals, I'd say, that are incarcerated, you could say, at Dublin Zoo, would be in a different mental state than what they were when they came in.
All right, so they couldn't
be. I think that would be prohibitive in letting them back into the wild, because I don't think they'd probably be able to defend themselves, because they have to get used to being fed and looked after. So they're not as wild as they used to be. So that's probably prohibitive. But that maybe there's sanctuaries. Years ago, the two polar bears that were on a strip of cement that were walking up and down all the time, pacing 6 paces this way, 6 paces that way. We used to go in and watch them. But a group called Bear With Us, they were a Canadian group. These two bears came from Canada as a gift, I think, to the zoo. They were so bad that we were trying to do discussions with the zoo. And I think they were like, I'd say, a black mark. If anyone went in, they could see how upset these two polar bears were. So we set out to get them out, which we did with the help of the person that's not here yet today, and Bear With Us. And they got them two places in Canada to bring them over to, and let them have a bit of a more normal life and a bit of freedom, that they could walk more than a few paces. So we all set that up.
It's a neat name for the group, isn't it, Bernie? Actually, we've got a comment that I'm going to put up on the screen so you can look. But hello to the Donegal Zeus and also Vegan Unity Day. Just put this one up first. This is kind of, to me, it's not really that relevant to what we're doing, but no, we're off the street because of the COVID thing at the moment. And the same goes for the Sunday one. Really was a joint one. It's mainly Vigo and VIP, but that's not running at the moment either. So no, we're not up and running until the lockdown eases. I think that's the thing. And then we've got this one, Bernie. So the topic of zoos seemed to be a really difficult one for the public to accept. I wonder if it's possible to find out how many surplus animals are killed in them and make that very public. Yeah, I think you'd probably have something to say about that, Bernie. But I tell you one thing that raises. I was talking to Jeremy Hess earlier on because he was helping with some of the tech stuff, and we were thinking that you don't see very elderly other animals in zoos very often. So I presume that they kill them, do they? When they're starting to look a little bit shabby. Do you know about that, Bernie?
Well, they are set up as a display. And they don't want people coming in and saying, my God, that poor old animal there, is in a bad state. What are you doing about it? They don't want to hear that. No. So I would assume that they move them when they're not looking their best. Just to finish that other story about the 2 bears that we made arrangements with people in England, with people in Canada, and everything else. When push came to shove, the zoo refused to let them go to a sanctuary that we had set up. So the 2 polar bears were left at the zoo. So they were really a sad state, But they were thinking of their reputation. It doesn't look great that we send them back to Canada after Canada giving them to us. And they turned them psychotic, basically, on the small little patch of land they're on. So anyway, that was the end of the polar bear story.
So they'd be sending them back in a terrible state, as it were, yeah?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just like to explain, the minute the general people that don't really know much about what's happening in zoos here, oh God, the zoo has no money, they immediately open the purse and say, we can't see the animals starve, which is a good thing. But they don't really look into it enough. They don't really look into it and say, look, poor animals shouldn't be there in the first place. This is not a good thing. It's not a good thing for the animals. I gravely doubt that they weren't going to be fed, because to the zoo, these animals are seen as property. They're their property. They're their assets. They trade them. They trade with circuses. They swap animals with other zoos. And that's the way it goes. That's the way the zoo works. But people don't really see that. They just saw hungry animals and came out with their purse. And really, it's admirable, if there was no more to it than that. But that's not the story.
Yeah, it's the usual thing about kind of emotional blackmail, really. Do you know the answer to the end of Vegan Unity Day question about surplus animals killed? I mean, presumably, see, they tend to sell them or swap them or kill them, don't they? I think.
Yeah, well, I'd hate to think about it. I mean, I know there were some zoos, not Dublin Zoo. Don't want to be hanged, drawn, and quartered over this. Not Dublin Zoo, but other zoos were feeding animals in the zoo to other animals.
Well, I think that's fairly standard for the obligate carnivore.
Yeah. But people don't see that, it's horrendous, really. If they care about them, that's not the way to treat them.
Well, I don't know. You see, I think at some point, I mean, you see, this might be one of the things that have changed over time. I seem to remember that in the 70s and stuff, I think that used to be a bit of a spectacle within zoos, that you would see, big chunks of zebra being brought out, and then they would throw them into the lion enclosure, and then see all the lions kind of fighting to get the flesh. I thought that was a kind of standard thing that was going on. Maybe the aesthetics of that got to be a bit difficult, and they decided
maybe it wore off people. Yeah. Well, I mean, we know there's more vegans everywhere now, and people are thinking about meat, so that's not as acceptable as it was years ago. If it was acceptable, I don't know. So
hello Jennifer. Just we've had a few of those. Tone is saying hi to Michelle. What's the
sorry.
Oh, now and then there were one, folks. Then there were one. Okay, so Jeremy, excellent point. VUD. So many don't see the downside of zoos. Yeah, well, it's interesting really, because it's got this issue that if you fund the feeding of the other animals, that's going to leave them in prison. If you then don't feed it, then they're going to be sold or killed. Always seems to me that, as usual with these situations, the other animals are in a kind of lose-lose situation. So they use emotional blackmail to kind of bring about some kind of change, or they get what they want in terms of funding, but it doesn't really change that much in terms of what goes on with the other animals, I wouldn't have thought. I'm just going to put this one back up.
Brendan sends apologies. He's on the way.
Oh, very good, excellent. We might have our second guest. That's excellent. Yeah, Vegan Unity Day. As I understand it, breeding programs produce an unbalanced number of males and females. Yeah, and there's another issue about the imbalance between adults and youngsters, because youngsters are more popular. That's the same with these family farms. You know that people like to see the bunnies and they like to see the lambs, but as soon as they kind of grow and don't look so cute, they get replaced. So where they go to and how exactly they get replaced is another matter. So I think that is probably true. And there's a lot of trading goes on. I mean, obviously, zoos like this idea that it's all to do with conservation. But of course, that's a difficult one in the first place, because you've got then this idea about habitat. Is there anything anywhere to send them to? Can they be rewilded, which is the kind of buzz phrase at the moment? These kind of ideas. So that would include an entire kind of program, which would probably take a long time. As Bernie said, in the meantime, the other animals are getting to the situation where they're not really in a state to be returned to what you might call the wild. So their viability as free living beings might be compromised just by waiting for the habitat to be reestablished. So you can imagine, usual thing is that, you know, humans, when we interfere, we really do mess things up. You know, the idea that I mean, there is a strand of thought in the movement that we should be interfering in free living spaces in order to reduce animal suffering. We don't have a very good track record at that. That's what I would say about that one so far. So I got that one. Nikki, who remembers? What's that? Maurice? What's that? The giraffe. I don't. Anybody else? Oh, okay. Here we go. This is Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I do remember that now. That's where you had a big semicircle of kids, wasn't it? This is not that long ago. It was about 2 years ago, isn't it? Where they had a semicircle of kids and they had this kind of vet who kind of deconstructed the animal in front of all the kids. If I remember, he caused a real storm. I think that's the example that's being referred to there. Yeah, here we go. Another one. I'm just getting used to putting these comments up. Jeremy normally does this, but so I'm not very good at it. But there we go. Yeah. So yeah, there's offers to adopt him, but it didn't go well. I mean, obviously, I think they fed him to the lions. But then again, if you've got obligate carnivores, you've got a problem anyway. You know, I mean, you're probably not going to get away with giving vegan dog and cat food to lions, I wouldn't think. So, so there's that kind of problem. Another comment from Vegan Unity Day. There's a great article on the Vegan Society website, which I point people to. As little as 5% of the face value of tickets go to conservation. Yeah. Well, I think from an animal rights point of view, we can probably say that this conservation angle is a little bit of a con. And even if it isn't, we're talking about something that's very, very complex to bring it about. I mean, we talked about something that would be very difficult to organize, very difficult to arrange, not to mention incredibly expensive. You know, so that would be one issue there. Hang on, let me just see. Hey, Brendan.
Hello, Roger. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Sorry, I was a bit pretty good. I'm sorry, I'm not too literate with the technology. I'm a bit behind on you.
Yeah, that's no problem. I believe you've been out doing things with seals. Is that right?
We have a few. The storms, they're breeding at the moment, Roger, and the pups are getting hammered by bad weather from time to time. You know, so it's the seasonal, you know, birthing season.
Do they get like thrown onto the rocks and stuff like that? Yeah.
Yeah, Storm Aiden kind of set it off. It was a perfect storm. It arrived just as they were peaking, giving birth. You know, and the young ones on the beaches, you know, if they were too close to the water, got washed away. In other cases where they were they were having difficulty finding opportunities to fish between bad weather, you know.
Yeah. Your audio changed a little. Your audio has changed a bit, but I think we can still hear you. I think there's been some comments that you might just going to scroll back to get them. If you should see this on the bottom of your screen there, you see it says about given your so I've described you as an ex-zookeeper. So tell us that story first. We might have got a problem here.
Had an early and passionate interest in wildlife. The zoo was the kind of holy grail to try and get a job in it, which I eventually did. And I morphed from being a passionate zookeeper to more being a passionate rehabilitator. But in the interim, protesting, whistleblowing wasn't known by that term in those days. It was more like treason and treachery, and you were blacklisted and sent to Van Diemen's conscientious keepers for exposing the conditions in the zoo, while groups like your own and Bernie's and the SPCA's and that were doing something similar on the outside. So that resulted in me losing a job and a government inquiry, and that's what's most significant, I think, of what's happening in the recent days. This is almost a replay of 30 years ago, where the zoo authorities have just
it seems that
on everybody that the zoo may have to close. They do not have the authority to do that. They tried it before. They got away with it. They got on an expansionary path. They got a lot of money, 25 million plus in the first 10 years. Well, God knows how much since. And they like everybody, they're no different to anybody else. They're affected by the epidemic, but they must have contingency plans. And to actually just put out the hand to government in a strong-arm fashion to get the money is completely unethical and immoral. It needs to be linked to full transparency and accountability and milestones, deliverables, a post-COVID plan for what is true conservation, and not for the trophy elements of the zoo, and not for the showbiz elements of the zoo. So I'd be very concerned about the call that's gone out to the government. What people choose to give in their own.
Brendan's signal seems to be sticking now and again, Bernie. So
not for me to interfere with.
Maybe if you
suggesting closure. They actually are tenants. I don't know if you can still hear me there. Which means they belong to the Irish people. They got, as I said, at that last, I would call it a ruse, that big clarion called possible closure, and the knee-jerk emotional response people would have to actually save the animals. The government will not be saving any animals by just giving them money without conditions.
Yeah. So what's the likely scenario then? They will just go on, and I mean we've got a question about how many surplus animals are killed, because there is an issue that is interesting here, because I've seen a lot of reports that COVID has been kind of very good for other animals in zoos, in the sense that because they're not being gawped at by humans so much, they're actually breeding more than usual. But from a zoo's point of view, that probably would then create a surplus. And also that means that they can then be sold on, or they might just have to dispose of them because they've got too many. Would that be right, Brendan?
Well, that's always been a concern with zoos, circuses, captive breeding. What was called the trading triangle, where zoos would breed up animals for opening times, and the end of the season in monkeys and lions and tigers, but they would go then on to other traders like the Chipperfields. So no animal in a zoo should be traded into those. And in fairness, Dublin Zoo, thanks to the Irish public, has been forced to change that policy. It's unlikely that happens anymore, trading with circus. But you have to be ever vigilant. This is the one thing that's been missing from the government inquiry. First of all, the McDoyle inquiry, God rest him, and then followed by the OPW inquiry into Dublin Zoo. They delivered everything, barring an oversight committee, a visitors committee, that allowing full access to the records, both financial and animal records. And there shouldn't be animals in zoos taking up space that are not specifically endangered or part of what's called a special species survival program under the guardianship of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Those programs are real. The animals have some prospect of making it back to the wild, but a lot of the animals are there for entertainment value, and there's no reason for them to be there, and no reason, certainly as you say, for them to be bred up in excessive numbers, that then it's difficult finding homes for them. And we see too many exotic animals in the hands of just ordinary people who don't have the training or background or experience to keep them, causing distress both for the animals, maybe death, and also for their owners. And so irresponsible Dublin Zoo should be keeping a long distance from them.
Yeah, it's we were just saying just before you came on that the idea of rewilding or returning them is probably going to be a very complicated thing anyway, not least expensive. And the idea, Bernie brought up the idea that by the time we were able to recreate some kind of habitat that they would be able to return to, they might not be in a fit state to return. Would you agree with that? Oh, we've got another computer glitch here. I think Brendan.
It's the area, Roger. It's the same when I try. Yeah. Yeah,
Brendan, if you can hear me, maybe you can move to a different part of the house, perhaps. I've just had a text from Jeremy, who's the tech genius of the Animal Rights Show, and he said that maybe you can get a better signal, but I'm not sure. But it seems fairly logical, Bernie, that that would be the case, wouldn't it? That we talked about a difficult what they call it, logistical thing, to actually kind of get them,
Yeah, you're coming back to me now, Roger. Sorry about that.
Back. Yeah, see ya.
Yeah. Somebody just messaged Brendan saying that you look like Santa Claus. So I bet you've heard that before, haven't you? that's not going to be the first time.
Filling his shoes a few times in the year for charities. I don't do
I hope I'm on the list, Brendan.
Dangerous. Is that reception better for you now?
Yes, that's much better. Yeah.
It seems to be. That seems pretty good. Yeah. In fact, you could try tilting your phone the other way. Make it. That might make. Yeah, just turn it just once, so it's kind of sideways on. Try do that. No, like just actually spin the phone so you're not looking at it. Like portrait landscape on a. Do you know what I mean?
Right. That's not bad there.
No, it's a question. I'm just trying to make your screen look bigger, so you can. Right. Yeah. Keep twisting it like that. No, I'm not. No, you kind of turn it the wrong. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. If you could see me now, Brendan. That's
perfectly.
Yeah. Well, if you turn your phone like that, it should. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
There, that's better, Brendan.
Right?
Yeah, that's excellent. We can see more of Santa Claus now. That's good.
Okay.
Santa Claus has arrived early.
Oh,
I have to apologize to all your listeners for the difficulties. Okay, we won't budge again now. I'll just answer your questions.
We've got viewers as well. We're transmitting to the world, Brendan. So you're.
My apologies. It's not the fault of the broadcaster. We'll emphasize.
Yeah, you're going to be famous after this. Don't you worry. Yeah. So we were saying that, you were saying don't fund the feeding, but of course they're using emotional blackmail, really, aren't they, Brendan? In the sense that if you don't give us money, they'll die, right?
Yeah, the big message that came out to everybody was, it was almost like the little sisters of the poor ringing the bell to say the nuns were starving. It was an emotional message, and it was pure blackmail. They have funds to carry them through to probably till next summer. They need a sustainability plan. Nobody is going to come out of this epidemic with just handouts. What's needed is a sustainability plan. And the zoo's job is the conservation. And I was very proud to be the proposer of that motion when they didn't have it even in their constitution, is the conservation of endangered species. And with the growing realization of the need for biodiversity and restoration of habitat, and what you were talking about, most particularly rewilding, animals will be needed for them. And so the right animals should be bred with the right genetic approach, and not bred without a prospect of getting back to the wild. They have to close the loop. There has to be a post-COVID sustainability plan that actually embraces the animals in the zoos, maybe 6 million of them around the world. Stop the ones breeding that shouldn't be breeding, and let them live out their days and concentrate on the ones that are required back in their own habitat. I don't know if that makes sense.
It strikes to me, this is kind of from an animal rights point of view now, that if the government are getting involved and they're prepared to kind of give large amounts to the zoo to bail it out in order to get it running again, the animal rights position will be to say, well, don't do that, but you give them money in order to transform it into a sanctuary. And so
I think they would be perfectly justified in making a condition like that. That is a very honourable position to take. It's not irresponsible. Like, we're looking, look what's happened to mink. It's absolutely heartbreaking. I know they're an obnoxious little creature out of place in many ways, but they're just being buried in mass graves in Denmark now. In our own case, they're going to curtail breeding. And eventually they will meet the same sorry end, from a cage that they spent their life in to probably by gas. Who knows what way they're going to do it.
Gas or anal electrocution, whichever.
Yeah, is that it? Oh, that's horrible, yeah. Bernie. So we need to be responsible. And I think the animal rights people have been a voice of common sense over the years and not recognized as much as they should be, dismissed as emotional and that. You've got to be emotional. You've got to respond to the plight of these animals anyway. But now science, new thinking in biodiversity and conservation is merging very much with their ideas of sanctuary. And sanctuary can be the wilderness itself, left unspoilt and unthreatened. It can be a halfway house, as we do in rehabilitation. Like, we keep animals in rehabilitation captive, in totally inadequate conditions. Till we get them back to the sea. But the end object is always there. They get back, thankfully, most of them do. And their idea of a sanctuary, it's a wonderful word. It needs to be explored fully, and the zoo authorities need to listen to people that know what they're talking about, other than just their own hard scientific approach.
Yeah, you mentioned the issue of the minks. And of course, we've got the thing about, especially in the States, apparently it's been worse in the States, where humans were giving COVID to the minks were giving it to each other, that mutated it, and then they were giving it back to humans in a mutated form, which might actually threaten the viability of the vaccine. That's how I understand that situation. But it's also been shown that big cats, there's been a case when big cats and a couple of domesticated small cats have also caught a version of COVID. So would it might be a position where you're never going to get you're probably never going to get a situation where humans are going to be welcomed back into a zoo, perhaps because of that, just that on its own, maybe.
You might never get a situation where humans would be
welcome back into zoos because of the danger of them giving the other animals COVID.
Yeah, no, I see what you're getting at. No, I think a zoo renamed a sanctuary, in reality as opposed to just literally, with modern science and barrier techniques and that they should be able to manage their animals in a healthy fashion, not transmitting to the public, and maybe the public have to come in slightly smaller numbers or spread over more time, or more, recognizing the need for privacy and distance between these animals, social distance between the animals, and a little bit more. Some of them require a lot of distance. So I don't think it would be impossible, but I don't know. It's a whole new. The pandemic has thrown open a whole new vista for us, and the sanctuary idea can be addressed. I think the public can still be invited to observe. I don't think they should be able to just observe on demand a specific species, up front and close to them. They need to be realized that what's going on in the cages, in the bushes, in the habitats, as they call them these days, a great misnomer. They need to realize that the animals do need privacy. But the virus thing is something threatening us all. Like the virus, the Spanish flu, appeared over the years following in horses. They mutate. The horse flu of current days has appeared in humans. The Foci distemper virus, which affected the seals back in the 80s and early 2000, wiped out half the common seals of Europe. So these things are happening all the time. The viruses, they transmitted, we believe, from Greenland huskies to seals to then wipe out huge numbers of seals. And I think the more crowded we make the world, the more we tread on each other's feet and into each other's space, which is particularly the case with wildlife. And these wet markets are a hazard because of that. The more we do that, the more I suppose we're going to face disasters like this again and again.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's true. Just a note I just muted myself there, but I'm unmuted now because I'm in a basement flat here, folks, and so the neighbors are cleaning. So if you hear something sound like thunder, it's their vacuum cleaner, and not actually thunder. But there you go. Yeah, it's a complicated old situation, isn't it? Because the interesting thing about, if you were to impose a kind of sanctuary model, then you would think in terms of maybe having an open day now and again, rather than it being a public attraction all the time. And that would then facilitate the privacy that you say that the other animals would benefit from. And then, of course, you would then want to stop the breeding programs and then just care for them until they die, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there would be animals that are actually currently on special species survival programs. There should be every rush to actually arrange their releases to restored habitat too. Like, it's a massive job. It's a wonderful challenge in many ways to people who are concerned for animal rights, animal welfare, even conservationists and scientists like myself. It's a huge challenge for us to actually, I don't know what the world population in zoos now is, but it's in excess of 6 million animals.
Yeah, wow.
It's a great challenge, and it's one we
that's the global figure then, is it, of the other animals in the zoo?
It's probably a bit old. It's probably more than that now.
Oh, okay.
No, I feel we're in a whole new world, and it's not necessarily a brave new world unless we actually get our heads around biodiversity, get our heads around climate change, get our heads around how limited the time we have left to actually address this problem is.
Yeah. So we have a comment here by Vegan Unity Day. For some of these animals, even being relocated to sanctuaries in Africa, etc., isn't safe. My wife.
No, you're right. Yeah, currently it's not.
Yeah. What's this thing about drugging lions and etc.? Oh, right. Okay, that's presumably for all the. No, it's a bit. This kind of fad, I suppose, now to have selfies. I've seen those things where they keep big cats sedated so people can take photographs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again,
it's endemic.
Another way of exploiting. But again, it's interesting, this thing about this mismatch with the idea that even if the zoos were serious about conservation, it would have to be a global a globalized idea, wouldn't it? Because you've got to return individuals to habitats in a managed way. Otherwise, they're just going to die. Then they're not going to be capable of surviving, are they?
No, and the habitat has to be there. But just an interesting point before you move off it. Actually, it's kind of pertinent. When you talk about the selfies, they've become endemic, and one of the big problems we have in rehabilitation of seals, in recent years, has been people coming across seal pups on beaches, taking a selfie with themselves and going off and forgetting the animal or disturbing the mother. And actually the people of Hoth even today and yesterday on Balscaden Beach, there was a little seal pup hauled out. Probably doesn't need to come in, but everybody was looking to get close to it. People were taking selfies. What the local people did and the swimmers did was put a cordon around it and said, enjoy it at a distance. And that's the right and sensitive approach to have. Going back to what you're saying about the rewilding, rewilding is the challenge of the future. I think without a doubt, it holds more answers than narrow-minded conservation or emotionally led welfare or that. Rewilding embraces everything. The welfare, the science, the management, and ultimately the politics. Too.
So while I'm having a coughing fit here, Bernie,
I'll take over.
Have you got your phone under control now? Have you?
Yeah. Okay, Brendan. I just mentioned earlier, years ago, we were all trying to get those polar bears moved.
Yes.
In the zoo, the 2 polar bears that bear with us were going to try to help to sanctuary.
That's right.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I can, Bernie. Yeah.
Did you ever find out what happened to them? What happened to them? They were very far.
Like a lot of things, it probably wasn't the ideal, but it was a better solution. They certainly weren't going back to the wild. They were highly stereotyped, as the various behavioralists that did studies on them confirmed, and as the ordinary public, informed by yourselves and other groups, confirmed also. They had a sad history. There was one particular year when they gave birth in the outdoor enclosure on concrete in front of the public and proceeded to eat the fetus or the youngster. So they were getting out of a horrific prison. They went to a bigger, I think it was Sofia. Where's Sofia? Hungary, is it?
Yeah. I thought it was Canada they were going to. No, yeah, maybe I'm wrong. I thought it was Canada was mentioned.
Oh no, bear with us was that was a black bear, brown bear.
Yeah,
and that went to Canada.
Oh, yeah.
That was the Castlemahan case, where the circuses were offloading surplus animals on private collectors around the country, and they would breed a litter, indulge their hobby, breed a litter, and they'd go back, because people got tired of the repetitive nature of the acts of cats and bears and that, So they danced the Blue Danube one year, they dance it the next year. They're looking, it's like Top of the Pops. They're looking for an animal that has an extra tune to its repertoire. The polar bears went to another zoo. I think it was Sofia, and I've forgotten that now. It was still a zoo. There was no outlet, no future for them, but at least they had more space, and there were other bears there too. So they would have finished their days there. They'd be long gone now. So that in itself was progress. That the public, as you remember, were outraged at the conditions the polar bears were in. They could see stereotype behavior in action for themselves. You didn't have to be a psychiatrist to see what was happening, and they made their voices heard through organizations like yourselves and that so something was achieved.
Yeah. Can you see any way forward for the zoo, Brendan, that would be better for the animals?
For the zoo itself?
Yeah, for Dublin Zoo.
Dublin Zoo, I think Dublin Zoo, being the 3rd oldest zoo in the world, and so highly held in public affection, I think there will always be a future for it. But I don't think it'll be it needs to be a future more along the lines you describe as sanctuary. And so maybe there's a renaming exercise needed, but not till it's deserved. There is no justification for just expansionary programs that keep more and more animals in more and more display cabinets. and keep growing. It's like sustainability. You can't grow that way. The animals that are not part of special species survival programs should not be allowed to breed and should be allowed to live their days out. The animals that are important genetically to the survival of the population of their species, where there are very low population in the wild. In many cases, like Siberian tigers, there's a higher population of Siberian tigers in zoos around the world than there is left in the wild. Those animals could have a future where the habitat to be made available, or the wilderness that is still available, was eased up, and with against other problems like poaching and that. So there's very interesting work going on in the field about the possibilities of bringing animals back. Like I was actually talking to, it's small, but a herpetologist in South Africa the other night, and they were out releasing amphibians, small frogs, that were bred up by Dublin Zoo. The Dublin Zoo, I'm sure, has Johannesburg Zoo, and I'm sure it has, surplus and all sorts of animals that maybe shouldn't be there. But that was a good program. Fota Wildlife Park, you heard the zoo director in the recent media talking about their efforts for the natterjack toad. They've also been doing, Fota's been doing some good work. It has no need to rely on show business. And Dublin Zoo, I know it's hard to say it. Like maybe people would expect me to be giving out more about it than I am. It has changed. It's been a painful change. The whistleblowers were like Maurice McCabe, only they didn't get justice in the end at all. The zoo authorities got a lot of money, and they're quite an industry in their own right, doing consultancy around the world, and with some valuable special species survival programs. But they have to offload the surplus. So before we give them 20 million, they need to commit to offloading the surplus animals. Allow them to live their days out, and that can't just be given unconditionally, and breeding animals just for fun and games. But it's funny when you look back at it.
There are places they could go. Yeah, there are places, sanctuaries that are available. Yeah,
that's often the problem, Bernie. The similar horned oryx, for argument's sake, which they do keep and breed, it has outlets. The white rhino, and we saw which rhino, one of the species of rhino go extinct there lately.
Didn't one die at the zoo? I think, yeah. Was it a rhino that choked on a tennis ball in the zoo there?
A hippo did that in Dublin Zoo in the old age, yeah. So
maybe introduce yourself, Brendan, because a lot of people that be listening here wouldn't know you. I think did we skip it, or did I miss that? Just introduce who you are, because people might know.
I'm Brendan the Herbert. People have moved on a lot since my time. I tell you, it's very interesting, Bernie, for me. Like I have great time for your organisation and the valuable work. Like when nobody else was raising the flag on issues of welfare and even more so rights, in your case, the voice was not heard. The media would not give it airtime. It was absolutely terrible, and you and your people and your members were terribly strong and resilient and enduring, that you made it an issue for so many people. And in any solution, you should certainly be considered in the future. Now, I don't know the answer to post-COVID. I suppose I would have ideas. I would love to be involved in the process of addressing the needs of the different species in the future, and seeing that money goes to the right places. Whatever money does come, seeing that the proper conditions are attached. It would be very exciting to be part of that and link up with the international programs, speed them up. But again, it comes down to the governments of the world. They're really the only ones with the big bucks to actually make big changes. Sanctuaries, NGOs, private wildlife parks, public ones in some cases. They're all doing their bit, but the scale needs to be ramped up hugely, particularly with climate change. Looking down the road, only 20 years before a lot of things have just got too big to handle the problems. We can handle the problems.
While we're still here, Brendan, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. But there'll be other followers. Like you've left a wonderful cohort of informed people behind us. You know, little groups like ours did the same with something as simple as the seals. You know, but in the old days, nobody knew what to do with one. Now you can bring them into any veterinary surgery, get them stabilized, bring them to you know, a sanctuary or a halfway house. You know, and Bob's your uncle. They're back in the wild 6 weeks later. People are engaging. I'm very hopeful. Like it sounds a big problem, and rewilding, you know, does face huge problems. And the sanctuaries, that'll be the halfway house to rewilding. You know, there is a chain there, you know, to actually address the plight of animals suffering currently, improve their conditions, you know, prepare them for a better life, and prepare the habitat to receive them. There is a, you know, a logical solution to every one of those 6 million animals, you know, by the collective efforts of not just the people that have had charge of them exclusively to this date, but by including, you know, rights groups, welfare groups, you know, the people that know what they're doing too. You know, it's not exclusively the domain of zoo directors, and it's quite a private little world. You know, zoo directors, zookeepers, exercising this monopoly over the world's wildlife. You know, our wildlife, not just theirs. And that's what I say when they use the word like closure. You know, I am adamant that the government, like these, believe it or not, were parties that had called for the closure of Dublin Zoo in the past, now in government. You know, they they cannot just hand over money without conditions.
Yeah, that's the problem everywhere. We have a few other situations that we're working on briefly. One of them is Ashton Pound. It's the pound that covers all of the dogs taken in Dublin by the 4 councils.
Right.
And there was an exposure done. There was a whistleblower. All the truth came out about the dogs that were killed, the dogs that were stuck in walls, the dogs that just suffered horrendously and were actually administered medication that should have been only administered by a vet and administered wrongly. Also, we have the greyhound situation that we're at Shelbourne Park every week for the last year and a half on a Saturday night. It's still going on. They got another 20 million. Every year they're just handed 20 million. And that's what's keeping it going, because the tracks are running at a loss and some have closed. So why are they throwing money at it? It's all money for the lads again. The same story. And the TDs that
gambling industry behind it.
Uses. Yeah, it's drastic. But it's very hard to fight when there's so much money. But they brought us to court. They spent thousands to get us to court, and we won. They brought us to the High Court. We spent 3 days in the High Court. They wanted to get us away from the gates outside from protesting.
Oh,
but we were back 2 days later.
People wanting to see you in court, Bernie. Don't you worry
I
about
was in court, but I didn't get behind the bars yet. So anyway, you know, this is what's going on. There's a lot going on. It's very hard to deal. There's so many issues. There's not enough people getting out on the streets. And, well, I know with the COVID and everything, but anyway, we're still there. So,
okay,
well, Bernie, I'm certainly humbled by the huge work you've all done over the years, and I can only wish you well, and we'll keep doing our little bit as best we can.
Brendan.
I know
well, now that we have you back, Brendan, you know.
The check's in the post. Now that you two have done a big advert for AFAR and the campaign.
I'm a YouTube star now, am I?
Yeah,
definitely. Yes, on the big screen.
The walls of the Hermitage are crumbling.
Well, interesting. We got that comment there saying a good thing about being a hermit is that you're less likely to harm others, which is pretty good. But then going back to Michelle here, and a bit of an advert. I'm Michelle's guest on her live stream on next Friday. I think it's 7 p.m. I think that's right. And so Michelle said being a problem child and went to Blackpool Zoo with the school, embarrassed the teachers by going around talking about the other animals showing abnormal behaviors, which of course is another kind of problem, isn't it? Because you talk about rewilding, you talk about returning to whatever, and then Bernie made the point that you've got psychotic and damaged other animals anyway in that sense. I also wanted to show you this one, which is interesting because there was a comment on this. This is from Jennifer. So there's somebody in RTE. RTE is the national broadcaster for people tuning in outside of Ireland, saying that the other animals miss the people because of COVID, and so the people are missing looking at the other animals, and the other animals are missing looking at the people. And Tone said, well, looking at the people is probably better than looking at a concrete wall. So that's a kind of commentary on that. But do you think that's true, Brendan? That they would actually, it gives them something to do for the people to be traipsing around, kind of thing.
It's a very interesting observation. Yeah, and you nearly need to answer it species by species. But animals that are confined, whose natural behaviours are thwarted and frustrated, are going to find displacement behaviours. So what people watching could be one. It could be for otters in a concrete enclosure trying to dig in concrete and wearing out its claws. It's it's not the I suppose in a way it's that's why I would say in the design of enclosures, the animals must have a retreat where they can have privacy and come out on display when they want. Like, funny enough, even little seals we have in rehab, when they come in, within days, they've exhausted the joys of their enclosure. They're actually watching the pathways for people to come that might be bringing fish. So it happens. Yeah, it's not they're not going to be the greatest candidates for reintroduction. What you want to be doing is in your enclosure design, accommodating their natural behaviors so that they are equipped when they go out. Like in years gone by, in the early releases of little primates like marmosets and tamarins, they were so used to feeding on the ground in captivity. When they reintroduced them to the wild, they did the same thing. They came down from the trees to eat in the ground rather than feeding the tree canopy, and as a result, became prey for other predators. So it's a simple little example, but the right behavior is important, and
Yeah,
like if
that's
we
sad, though, isn't it? Yeah, that's sad. That's sad.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And but some of them are past, I suppose, redemption, or our powers to redeem them, so that they need to just live their lives. And if they enjoy looking at people, I suppose they can break the privacy of the cover at the back of the cage and come up and sit at the front and watch people passing by. That's but it's just like a consequence, an unforeseen consequence.
Yeah,
I feel sorry for the birds. I don't know, the birds. Don't they pinion the birds? They can't fly, and the birds in the zoo.
Yeah, no, bird in. What's that? The old saying, bird in the
cage.
They
cut the feathers.
Yeah.
I always just feel birds should fly. That's why they wings. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's another saying, isn't it? Oh, for the wings of any bird except a battery hen. I think was one that was a Hawkwind lyric in the 1980s. I've got a direct question for you, Brendan. Here, which is: are there any acceptance? Is there any acceptance from people working in zoos that things need to change? Do you think they're open or a bit resistant?
Initially, they're very resistant, and I suppose I can talk of this going back 30 odd years and more. Knowing the particular staff of Dublin Zoo and many other staff from other zoos, extremely resistant. But it's a knee-jerk reaction to their perceived judgment by other people of them as being cruel people. And I would say that, and people might disagree. They are not cruel people. By and large, they're not. They are defending their position. Thankfully, modern animal welfare, animal husbandry, animal management, has improved by leaps and bounds. And they feel more qualified to, even defend their own patch.
So they're more open than they ever have been. But what's happening here with this call for the 20 million or whatever they're looking for, is a completely regressive step, whereby with the authorities, they will withdraw into their bunkers to fend off criticism as they see it. They take it very personally because they're responsible for the welfare of their animals, and they look on their animals as being theirs, literally, their charge, their family, their possession. So it's a difficult one to crack. They need to be drawn into the conversation gently. When they do that, their skills are very valuable. So I would see, I would have great time for more and more open discussion, in a facilitated in a non-threatening way with zoo staff, and see where it brings us, because a lot of them would have skills, that will be part of the solution for individual animals or individual species, and rewilding and that, If I was headhunting staff and we were big enough to do that, I would look at zookeepers amongst others.
What about the institution itself? Do you think they're more open to change as well?
In the case of Dublin, I haven't had much dealings with them in some years now, and I've more or less devoted myself to rehabilitation rather than zoo type conservation, as they call it. I don't know the new management, so it wouldn't be fair to say. I think the behaviour of just landing this dramatic request of the public and the government to just bail them out without any explanation as to how, we all know about COVID, but other than that, any explanation as to how they've got into such a mess and what really needs helping, I think they need to be sat down at a table before writing any checks,
Yeah, it's interesting. The reason I bring that up is because there is an interesting sociological paper that I'm familiar with by a guy called Richard Gale, and you've mentioned animal rights and animal welfare and conservation, these kind of ideas, and that argument is that if animal rights people stick with making rights-based points about other animals being rights bearers and all the rest of it, what tends to happen then is that the institutions and the government get together and improve on the welfare, because they can't endorse animal rights because that would mean that they would be closed down. What they tend to do as a response to an animal rights thing is improve the welfare, because that's kind of the only thing they can do. And in a sense, that seems to be what you've said over the period, which is interesting.
Yeah, that is very, very interesting. I must give that some thought, actually.
I'll send you
equally then you could reverse the question you put, like, about whether the authorities in the zoos are willing to be open to constructive criticism, let's call it. Equally the rights groups and welfare groups need to be educated as well to some degree in the ways of zoos and what their understanding of adequate welfare is. It's an interesting area. Needs people sitting down. It's not going to be sorted by trench warfare.
No. Well, that is true. In fact, there's a famous animal rights philosopher called Tom Reagan, and he was definitely. He said that a little bit like Nelson Mandela. Really, the key is educate, and educate, and so that implies dialogue and also a bit of diplomacy. You don't educate by shouting at people. You need to create kind of dialogue.
But you know what, Roger? Maybe we should do as you suggest there. Because 30 odd years on since what was a government inquiry and the forerunner of many government inquiries, so 30 years on, it's a changed zoo, and COVID apart, maybe the time has come for not so much an inquiry, but another review, a more inclusive review of where the zoo is going for the future, if at all. But I would stress they don't have the authority to close it.
No.
That would be the choice. That would be the choice of Irish people.
Yeah. Well, obviously, the reason that usually these institutions don't really talk to rights-based people is because the rights position is fairly absolute and just says close it down. That using them in the first place is a rights violation. So that's why they're more in tune with animal welfare points, which is about tidying things up. And so
yeah, I take your point. Yeah,
it's harder for us to talk to people like that than it is for welfareists, you know.
yes. Well, what little I can do to open the debate, I would encourage, the rights people maybe to sit in on consultations, even if they didn't want to be part of the actual final solution. Let's say there is no final solution.
We'll use you as a bridge, Brendan, between us and them. So we're over an hour in, so we kind of got over our technical problems. So I want to thank you both, Brendan and Bernie, for a really interesting kind of discussion, and it kind of went into some really interesting areas. Thanks to everybody who commented and asked questions, and I guess it's time for us to say goodbye, really. And so goodbye, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. So
thanks, Brendan.
Yeah,
thanks, Roger, for guiding us through it. And see you, Bernie, soon.
You take care.
Bye-bye.